because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something, but we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of, but it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible.
All right. So these people, Afrikaners is what they're called, are descendants of Dutch settlers, culturally unique, largely Afrikaan speaking. They're victims of violent farm attacks, discrimination under Black economic empowerment policies, and land expropriation threats with no compensation. Nicole, what are your thoughts on this?
This seems like a complicated issue, but I think it was S-Files who had it right in the chat. This is what the refugee program is for. This is exactly what we've done around the world when people were in grave, immediate danger. Not because I'm in a gang and the rival gang is going to probably try to beat me up and I need to come to the United States, but in imminent danger for your life, simply based on who you are as a person, not because of your hobbies and the things that you do. So this is a very different look. And he's right. If this were Black people being slaughtered, you wouldn't be able to turn on a TV or a radio or a podcast anywhere in this world without people screaming from the top of their lungs. The only thing that I can think of that's akin to this is the Christians in Nigeria that are being hunted down and killed because of their religion. And as you all know, the United States has welcomed many, many Nigerians to this nation.
The media and whatever they say is trash to me. I do not recognize them as a legitimate source of information. They are set up to be purveyors of propaganda and division. The truth of the matter is you've got people in South Africa like Julius Malema. He is an assembly member and one of the more prominent figures in the economic freedom fighters. That party, they are avowed communist. And you can check this out on YouTube. They fill stadiums and start chanting, "Kill the Boer." All right. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine if you had a political party in this country that could get stadiums full of people to chant, "Kill the insert ethnicity." That's what's going on. Combine that with the fact that there is no Second Amendment as we know it, right? So you've got the police. There are police who recognize this as wrong, but they are vastly outnumbered, okay? I would encourage the audience, if they haven't already done so, to take a look at what's really going on in South Africa. And then you will, unless you're, one of these liberal Democrats, of course, you might applaud it if you're one of them. But right-minded people, sane people will be absolutely astonished if they're not already aware. And there was a young woman from one of the Latin American countries. She applied for asylum early in the Biden administration, and she said her reason was because she was a victim of domestic abuse. Her husband was violent toward her, which is regrettable. But that is not something that we can guarantee will not happen here.
Exactly.
Okay? Asylum is meant for situations where your government is out to get you. And if you got a major political party chanting, "Kill your ethnic group," I'd say that's an indicator that your government's out to get you.
Trump has virtually halted refugee admission in America for people fleeing war and famine in places like Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Back with Rick, Mark, and Eddie. Rick Stengel.
Yes, it's so deeply and morally wrongheaded and repulsive. These are the descendants of the people who created the most diabolical system of white supremacy in human history, apartheid. They're not directly responsible for it, but it was a system that actually moved black people off of the arable land. So they inherited the land that the black people had to give up. It was called forced removal. It was something called a Bantustan policy, where they moved black people out of the cities and farmlands into these remote areas with non-arable land. I mean, it was just one of the most worst processes ever. But what has happened in this strange, bizarre world we're living in is that the Afrikaners have become the darling of these right-wing white supremacist movements around the world. That it's like the lost cause for them. It's like the old Confederacy. They're held up as these white Christians who are being dispossessed of their land. It's like this is a modern replacement theory in a country where, by the way, white people make up 7% of the population and own 78% of the farmland.
Stingel.
Right.
That's a German surname.
Yeah.
That's a German surname.
Say
What
what
I'm talking about? Sins of the father? Wow. Okay.
He don't have that card to play. He really
Right.
does not have that
Right.
card to play. That was my overriding sensation. And before he, got his panties in a bunch and started spouting off, he should remember that the Biden administration let in 500,000 Haitians unchecked into this nation, fleeing what they perceive to be the collapse and failure of their government. If you go to the Eastern Shore here in Maryland, guess what you're going to see a lot of? Haitians and Ukrainians. Why do you think that is? They didn't choose Maryland's Eastern Shore. This is where they were deposited by the federal government. They were considered refugees under the Biden administration. It makes me sad when people try to paint the United States as this horrible, super racist country, especially when your last name is Stengel and you got blonde hair and blue eyes, bro. Especially when you come with that card and you're sitting there looking so sad and so unhappy. And America's such a horrible place, as you sit there making your $30 million a year talking about how bad and a horrible place this is. It makes me so angry with these people. This is not a racist nation. We bring in people from all over the world for a myriad of reasons. Why? Because they're white, should we let them be killed?
Well, this is what I wanted to ask. So they're saying that because these Afrikaners are descendants of apartheid, they should not be let in. Shelley, what are your thoughts on that, or your response?
So basically what we're seeing in South Africa is another iteration of apartheid. It just so happens that the people in the ANC or who are in charge happen to look more like us, but they are doing the same thing that was done to their ancestors in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and maybe 90s, whatever. So this is what's happening. That's number one. Number two, the Afrikaners who own the lands and the farms, if they are being slaughtered, sought out simply because they are white. Those people on MSNBC are doing nothing except trying to couch their Marxism, their racism in these glowing terms. But all they're doing basically is advocating for the extinction of these and the murder of these white farmers. Now, having said that, back in 1913, when the South African government instituted the land grab or the land confiscation from the black owners, then South Africa still had some soul searching to do, if you will. You don't soul search by murdering people who had zero to do with what their ancestors did, okay? It was wrong from the beginning when they took the land and forced the black people off. That was wrong. We had the apartheid, the sanctions, and the divestment. We went through all of that. But you don't correct it by murdering the protege or the future generations of those people who did that. So this is a big quandary. Of course, they should be given asylum. They should be given asylum even in Europe if they go to European countries. However, South Africa has a lot of work to do. Apartheid seems to have come back. Nelson Mandela in a sense, has died in vain.
Mhm.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, I mean, The Guardian accused President Trump of normalizing white victimhood. Again, MSNBC called it racial favoritism. So my question is, why do Western governments and media refuse to acknowledge anti-white persecution? Let me get
Because
your
there's
thoughts
no
on-
such thing, remember? I mean, you can't, because, you know, at least from the American perspective, I mean, hell, Black people can't even be racist, okay? So therefore, anything that white people do is, no matter what the position or no matter why, it's seen as a big taboo. They're wrong. They deserve it. You know, they were the slave holders, things like that. It's a distortion. It's a murderous distortion, because these philosophies, this Marxism, again, they are getting more and more people murdered every year. Marxism in the 80s, 90s, over 100 million people died under communist Marxist rule. We still have it. And unfortunately, South Africa, again, seems to not have learned its lesson. I don't believe that this was the lesson that Nelson Mandela and all of those other people fighting against the horrible system of apartheid. I don't believe that this is what they died for and fought against, only for the Black Africans, South Africans, to come and do the same thing to the white people.
Well, this is here on MS. I'll get you in on this, Tyrone. This, or like for you to respond to this woman on MSNBC. She gives a stunning response to this. This is clip 9.
Well, in my view, what makes it different is that they are white South Africans. The president, in my view, has not hidden his racism behind a bushel. In fact, you know, in his policies, whether it's removing government workers or, in this case, admitting white South Africans while denying refugee status, asylum seekers from other countries, principally Central and South American and Black nations, to come into this country. And so I think that, you know, this policy, while it's not surprising in this action, really speaks of the underlying message in this that disrespects and shows disdain for people of color while embracing these Afrikaners now, and also expediting the process by which they can come into the country while denying that same process to other refugees.
Just another idiot that held a seat in Congress at one point. That corrupt organization is full of those kinds of people. South Africa has not learned Zimbabwe's lesson. They are following the same path of this racial retribution that ends up pretty much destroying the country. Robert Mugabe, he did this whole, I'm going to evict the white farmers. What did that end up in? Famine, a $1 trillion banknote, because literally their inflation got so ridiculous that you had to literally carry a wheelbarrow full of Zim dollars to get a loaf of bread. And if you left, this happened. A guy left the wheelbarrow full of Zim notes just to see if he was in the right line. He got back, the Zim notes were on the ground and the wheelbarrow was gone because it was worth more than all of those banknotes he had in it. Okay. So South Africa has already had, they've seen this. They fired all of the white people associated with a desalinization plant. What happened? They weren't able to get fresh water in a region of South Africa. So what did they do? They went over to Germany and hired a bunch of white folk. Okay. This is the kind of insanity where you're letting race-based issues result in the literal destruction of the country for everyone in it. Okay. And their economy, I tell you what, they are the weakest member of the BRICS group, the weakest original charter member. So it's not like what they're doing is even working. There's history to the north, and it's not ancient history in Zimbabwe. And they seem content to repeat it.
Yeah, this is evil. This is evil. And I encourage you all to check out the videos that Tyrone mentioned of massive crowds, stadium-filled crowds, it looks like hundreds of thousands of people shouting, "Kill these white Afrikaners." This is evil, pure and simple. And we are seeing an evil spread across this globe, this racial idolatry. I keep saying that that's what this is, and it's evil. And actually, many of these Afrikaners coming over are Christians. That's something to talk about. They're Christians. So, again, from my view, we are all brothers and sisters in Christ. And so no matter your color. Now, talking about the racial dynamic that the left continues to push on President Trump, during his first term, I believe it was from 2017 to 2020, President Trump let in many different ethnicities as refugees. So despite reductions, he did have reductions, and he did have a pretty big vetting process, but he let in refugees in his first term from the Congo, Myanmar, Syria, and Iraq. These are all black and brown people. He let them in, despite the reductions on the refugee plan. So it's not anything about race, I would say. It's like you said, Nicole, he's letting these people in because they are facing persecution. And I'm sure there's another part of this. These people do seem to have or hold the same type of politics and beliefs as many of as the right, as the conservatives. That doesn't hurt us either. So we'll continue to follow this. Go ahead.
One more thing I want to say. I had this pulled up. I didn't mention this first, but I think it was Tyrone or whomever was talking about the rates, or the people on The View, I think it was, or MSNBC, about the rates that he's not letting in people. Well, according to the justice.gov, this is the Justice Department. I'm just going to throw out a few countries in Africa. Okay, we have the Congo. The grant rate, that means that people were granted asylum compared to the denial rate. 42% were granted versus 10% denied. Okay, let me find another. Tyrone, you mentioned Zimbabwe. I'm going to go down to Zimbabwe. 32% of the Zimbabwean refugees were granted versus 21% who were denied. So the grant rates are higher than the denial rates. Give me another country in Africa. Tanzania. 36% were granted asylum versus 29% denied. So the grant rates to the denial rates seem to be, if you look at the chart, again, go to justice.gov, you can see it yourself. There may be some where it's the denial rate was higher, but for most of the countries in Africa, certainly the grant rate was higher than the denial rate. So these people are not even comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. They're throwing out different countries, different numbers, but keep in mind also that many other countries in Africa, Congo, Benin, Sudan, they have fewer people. So the percentages and the rates are going to be a little bit higher. It's going to be skewed by the number of people, which is why you use a percent to compare the denial rate and the grant rates and not just the numbers.
Yeah. And one thing, people look at President Trump's past presidency. He generally prioritizes refugees from religiously persecuted minority groups. Also those with close U.S. ties, family, government work, military service. So this is some of the things he prioritizes when talking about these refugees. But we will continue to follow this story. It's getting old though. This whole racial thing, I was just thinking today, I was like, if we did get to the press room of the White House, I would ask President Trump, I would say, the media, the legacy media continues to paint you as a racist when you gave money to the Rainbow Push Coalition and Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton back in the 80s and 90s. You put up the singer from American Idol. What was her name? Now she's
Jennifer Hudson.
Jennifer Hudson, when her entire family was gunned down and killed. You put them up in Trump Hotel for months. The list goes on. You've had friends and from Oprah to all these Black celebrities, all in the 80s and 90s and prior to him becoming president. What do you say, or why do you think these people do not speak up for you when we know this is the truth? It's all been reported. You know, this is ridiculous. This is old. This is getting old. This man is not racist. The media is cherry picking what they want to try to paint some narrative that he is when it doesn't show that he's racist. So we will continue to follow this story, folks. Again, please hit that like button, and subscribe if you haven't done so. What are you waiting for?